I'm Richard Knowles, and I welcome you to Module 5 of this course on leading and using the process Enneagram. I hope you're getting a lot of good information that you can use as you go forward. In this module, I'll share an important 19-year case study comparing two leadership processes that resulted in two very different safety outcomes. When you change the process, the outcomes change. But before I do that, here's some good feedback from a couple of people who have been in the trenches of leadership and safety. This is a mini case study from Gwen Andrews, who was the assistant director at the English Language School in Weihai, China. I initiated the use of the process Enneagram when I was teaching in Weihai, China. The small, privately held school was teaching English to students who were intending to emigrate to Canada or the USA. The top-down, communist-driven management processes were blocking cross-cultural learning and creating a lot of dissatisfaction among the students, faculty, and staff. I had learned about the process Enneagram in my master's program at Royal Roads University in Victoria, Canada, and decided to use it with the faculty and staff to transform the school. I used the process Enneagram as a discipline tool for dialogue. I worked hard to build trust and openness. We used the pattern 0, 3, 6, and 9 with the multicultural faculty and staff people to identify the changes that they thought were needed. Then we used the pattern 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and 1 to identify and plan the specific work that needed to be done. As the process and work unfolded, new energy emerged to power the whole process of transformation. As a result of this work together, the students, faculty, and staff all began to thrive, and the school grew quickly. Even in this communist-controlled culture, the use of the process Enneagram was very successful. This testimonial from Paul Avey, the managing director of the Weir Minerals Multiflow plant in Coolum Beach, Queensland, illustrates how well the process Enneagram works in the industrial environment. Dick Knowles uses a hardcore business improvement process that helped us to increase our turnover and profitability by threefold in just 2 years. We've saved over $100,000 in lower costs related to injuries. If you want to more sustainably change your organization for the better and develop an improved quality of work life for everyone in the company, then talk to Dick Knowles. I've worked with Paul in a number of facilities, and it's great to see that he's had success like this. Both of the case study and the testimonials show the power and effectiveness of using the process Enneagram in vastly different cultures and types of organizations. It's all about the people and how they want to work together to accomplish their goals. Here's a quick review of what we covered in Module 4. There were some powerful case studies bringing harmony and the natural processes of self-organization and doing into harmony. The case studies that we showed were from a big sugar mill. We shared a large 2-year project to share worst-case scenarios with a large metropolitan area. We talked about a truck fabrication plant, the City of Niagara Falls leadership team, and the Geelong wire mill. All of these showed the power of using the process Enneagram to help a variety of organizations and people become the best they can be. In the sugar mill, truck plant, City of Niagara Falls, and the Geelong wire mill, all the changes happened quickly. None of the projects required any elaborate training, new computer programs, or new capital investment. They were almost free. Here's the agenda for Module 5. I'll share a 19-year case study, talk about sleepwalking and waking up, emphasize the importance of the principles and standards, talk about the characteristics of leaders, and talk about having meaningful conversations together with our people. In this first case study, I presented this information to the American Institute of Chemical Engineers at their annual conference. It was a Zoom conference and held on August 18, 2020. The case study was demonstrating the successful plant leadership transition that improved process safety performance. My co-author was Bruce Vaughn, who now works at the Center for Chemical Process Safety. Now, here's a little bit of information about me, which most of you already know. Here's some information about Bruce. He's a PhD chemical engineer. He's worked for DuPont and several other companies and now works for the Center of Chemical Process Safety. He's the lead process safety subject expert. He's written books and guidelines for chemical engineers to improve their process safety management. He's one of the most highly regarded process safety management scholars around and is very helpful in writing this paper together with me. The work covered in this case study took place at the DuPont, now Chemours, plant in Bell, West Virginia, where I was the plant manager. The plant lies along the Kanawha River near Charleston, West Virginia. It's about a mile long and a third of a mile wide. The plant handled the second highest number of hazardous materials in DuPont. The big white tank in the lower right is about 110 feet high and 100 feet in diameter and can hold about 40 million pounds of anhydrous ammonia. We also handled things like tank cars of hydrogen cyanide, sulfuric acid, methylamines, and some isocyanates. The people were highly skilled in handling highly hazardous chemicals safely. In this study, comparing the safety performance of the people when working together using partner-centered leadership and the top-down management process. For a part of the study, these two leadership processes were running at the same time in parallel. Now, I want to talk about leadership and managership again, just to be sure that you all remember this. I've talked about it in earlier modules, but it's important to keep emphasizing the importance of these activities, being leaders and managers. Leaders focus on people changing the future. Organizations are seen as living systems, complex, adapting, self-organizing networks of people. They value the open flow of information, building trust, and a sense of belonging. Managers focus on systems, processes, and the status quo. Organizations are seen as machines and people as interchangeable parts. And they value reliability, stability, predictability, and control. Now here are shown some of the cultural characteristics of partner-centered leadership. And again, I've reviewed this before, but I think, again, I want to be sure that you have it in your minds. In this culture, it's safe for anyone to speak up, share information, ask questions, and provide feedback to anybody at any level. Decisions are made by the people at the correct level, those that are close to the work. People come together and they solve problems. High levels of trust build, and the gap between work as imagined and work as done gets closed. I had very high value in this way of working, and that led me to spending 3 to 5 hours a day for almost 8 years in the plant, talking with people, listening and learning together. This chart shows some of the characteristics of top-down managership. This is the most common management approach, and its roots go all the way back to Frederick Taylor in his book Principles of Scientific Management, written in 1911. He was an excellent efficiency expert. People's work was measured in time studies as if they were machines. These ideas from Taylor still hang over us 110 years later. Most people do not like being treated like a machine and interchangeable parts. They resent it deeply. In this study, we took a look at our total recordable case rate as one metric and our toxic release inventory as another metric. The total recordable case rate are the numbers of injuries that are reported to OSHA on the 300 log. This is a lagging indicator. It's not how you run safety, but it's a way to see how you're doing in a way of keeping score. The toxic release inventory relates to the pounds of materials that are released to the air, water, and land, and that includes all releases, whether they're permitted or not. And they are an indicator of how well the process safety management is going. We need to keep the chemicals in the pipes to prevent accidents, but we also need to keep working to improve yields and reducing the amount of waste from our processes. This is a lagging indicator. This slide shows how we used partner-centered leadership approach to bring all three dimensions of the safety together. Occupational safety and health and process safety management each have their own circles of technology and practice that are managed within these tight operating focus. Occupational safety is focusing at slips, trips, and falls. Occupational health is focused at emissions, repetitive motion injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome and back injuries. And process safety management is focused at, as I said earlier, keeping the stuff in the pipes and improving yields. Each of these has their own operating discipline, but when the three circles come together in this Venn diagram, you can see where the partner-centered leadership interconnects them all and brings them together and brings them into focus. When we met in our monthly Central Safety Committee meetings at the plant, we had about 50 people from all levels in the organization. And we talked about all three aspects of the safety and the need for all of us to work together, paying attention to the whole safety picture. Everyone knew what was going on in all aspects of the work and felt a desire to contribute in helping each other where they could. During my first year as plant manager, the focus was to reestablish our standards, which had fallen apart under the previous plant managers. I used a hard top-down approach to get us back onto the high road. Then I moved to the partner-centered leadership approach, and our results got even better and better. This slide shows what happened to our safety approach after I had been transferred. The new plant managers that came in pulled the safety process safety management piece back to themselves. They broke the Venn diagram apart, taking the process safety management away from the whole. The central safety meeting discussions began to fall apart. Occupational safety and health continued to be managed by the supervisors, mechanics, and operators who were close to the work. And they maintained the world-class performance, and the managers did not interfere or mess with what they were doing. But the managers were under constant cost pressure, so they began to put fewer and fewer resources into process safety management, which they had pulled to themselves to manage, as separate from the other work. The process engineers knew they needed better support for their work, but the managers kept pulling manpower and investment away from it under the cost pressures. You remember from the top-down management slide that I showed earlier, managers do not know the people, tend to stay in their offices, and don't know what's happening deep down in the plant. The process safety performance gradually fell apart. Routine inspection schedules began to drift. Safety work orders piled up. Some engineers were reassigned to other work to save money. Routine preventative maintenance was delayed. The whole attitude towards process safety management became very sloppy. Keeping the leadership and managership processes in mind, along with the pictures that I created about the Venn diagrams and looking as an integrated whole, I put these charts together. to illustrate what it is we're talking about. On the left side of this chart shows the total recordable injury rate. The vertical lines on this vertical axis on this diagram show the injury rates. So when I came into the plant in 1987, the total recordable injury rate was about 5.8. Driving it hard down, we came down into the range of about 0.7 or 0.8. But it was very hard for us to sustain that. We were fighting and arguing. It was very difficult. And so about 1990, we went to teams. And the injury rates immediately dropped down, and we're now at world-class levels, operating at 0.3 or even better. In 1995, I was transferred from the plant. But 1995 on throughout 2006, the people close to the work continue to operate at world-class levels on their total recordable injury rate, taking care of the occupational safety and health activities. I didn't take the charts beyond 2006 because they changed the way in which they were calculating the numbers. For these charts, all the numbers are being calculated on a consistent basis. On the right-hand side of this is the toxic release inventory chart. When I came into the plant, the emissions to the environment were about 6.4 million pounds. As we began to work together and drive and improve our standards, the emissions to the environment went down into the 2,500,000 pound level. Then we shifted to teams, and the emissions continued a steady drop all the way down to 1995, when we had emissions of about 240,000 pounds. That's a lot, but if that's an annual number, and if you compare that, it's about like a half of a tank truck of gasoline being spilled each month. And for all the tanks that required venting so that they weren't damaged, this is not a bad level for the plant that we're operating in. When the new managers came in, you can see that the emissions to the environment jumped up tenfold, up into the range of 2.5 million pounds per year, and stayed there. And again, I stopped the charts at 2006 also because the economy changed and a lot of production activities dropped or were changed. But you can see that with partner-centered leadership and the self-management, the people close to the work kept the total recordable injury rate, case rate down at a world-class levels. Our toxic release inventory shows a dramatic change from partner-centered leadership, where we were down to about 240,000 pounds, and it jumped tenfold up to about 2,500,000 pounds by the top-down management approach. Over the years, as they were operating, things began to get more and more ragged. And they culminated in 2010, in January 22 and 23, into a disaster. They had a 25-pound release of oleum. Oleum is sulfur trioxide dissolved in 100% sulfuric acid. And when that gets out in the air, it makes a big white cloud. They also had a release of methyl chloride of over 2,000 pounds to the Kanawha River. And then they had a phosgene release that killed a man. And this phosgene release clearly shows how the process safety management fell apart. In this process, there was a flexible hose with a stainless steel braided cover that was supposed to be changed every month. This had been neglected, and at 7 months it failed, and a man happened to be standing right there, unfortunately, and he was exposed, and it killed him. They had another problem in September 21st when they had 160,000 pounds of methanol released to the Kanawha River. And then on December 3rd, they had a hot methylamines released from a sampling tap, and 2 men were badly burned. At this point, the Chemical Safety Board came in to see what the heck was going on. They reported that the occupational safety and health was running at a world-class level. But the process safety management was a disaster. They found that DuPont was not even using their own standards for process safety. They had all fallen apart. It's interesting that when we consider what happened at the Deepwater Horizon problem in the Gulf of Mexico just 4 months later. You remember that a day or two before the explosion, the people on the platform had received some awards for excellence in occupational safety and health. But just like at the Bell plant, the process safety management was all falling apart. And on April 20th, they had an explosion. Unfortunately, it caused the death of 11 people and cost $61 billion before they were finished. Process safety management, partner-centered leadership processes work best. They work best for the people. The total recordable case rate was down over 95%. They worked best for the environment. The emissions were down over 95%. It's good for process safety, and hazardous chemicals are being kept in the pipes and yields are improving. It's good for the business. Productivity's up 45%. Earnings up about 300%. It's a win-win-win for everybody. And that was the way in which we needed to move. Now I want to shift to take a look at the habits that support the top-down management approach and that cause these kind of poor performance in organizations. These habits run deep. They come out, as I mentioned earlier, from the work of Frederick Taylor back in 1911, and they're still with us. But beyond that, we also were influenced heavily by this top-down approach. As we were growing up, we figured out whether mom or dad ran the show. When we went to school, we found the teacher ran things. When we got into trouble, we found the principal ran things. So there was always someone bigger, smarter, more powerful than us running things. At work, in the military, in church, there was always someone in authority who knew more and told us what to do. The boss is always smarter and knows more than we do. A lot of us have bought into this model. I did in my early part of my own career until I learned about partner-centered leadership. When we have this model in our mind, we get into the place where the boss seems to know everything and takes all responsibility, and I don't have to do anything. I can just sit back and wait. I can sleepwalk through life. This is a myth, and it's killing us mentally and sometimes physically, and that's just terrible. And just again, a quick review of the top-down process Enneagram chart I did with them. The question was, what is safety like here? And they told me that when we got to the issues and ambiguities, that these were all the problems that they were facing. Production versus safety. Slow response to safety issues. Discipline's difficult. Cost and time pressures are terrific. They have old mills that need a lot of maintenance, but there's few maintenance dollars. They have a seasonal workforce. They have poor understanding of policies and procedures. There's a burdensome paperwork load. Poor attitudes among the people. Constantly changing standards and rules. Too much micromanagement. And the people rather take risks than change. They want to stay in their comfort zone. They want to stay in the myth of the top-down management. And their principles and standards were not supportive at all for them becoming safer and safer. They felt that you can't stop all injuries. Shortcuts are okay. They have inconsistent, wishy-washy standards. They don't listen, value, or respect each other. They don't take care of each other. They love firefighters. There's no praise for positive reinforcement. And they take the piss out of each other. And in this environment, their total recordable case rate, you remember, was about 10. When we shifted the question and asked, what can safety be like here? And we began to look at this. We looked at the principles and standards. Now they are very supportive of having safety excellence. Safety is number one. They have agreed to consulted sets of rules. There's persistence. Everybody's personally responsible. People are consistent. They listen to each other and be respectful that retraining is done well. They seek understanding and share. They live and apply the safety procedures. They promote participation and commitment. Measure and track progress. Sustain the work. And use discipline when and where needed. Whenever I've run these workshops and we move to the second map and talk about how can things be better, we always get a very fine, strong set of principles and standards that's co-created and everyone agrees to live by them. And when we apply those and begin to look at the issues that they had in the morning, many of them disappear. Those that stay, like production versus safety, were old mills in the need for a lot of maintenance and no money. People can talk together about those problems out of the basis of these principles and standards, and they can find reconciliation and find ways to be able to bring both of these together and accomplish things. This is always what happens. The principles and standards are utterly important for us to work together to achieve the things that we want to achieve. Now I want to talk about the iceberg of ignorance that I mentioned earlier. This is a metaphor, comparing organizations to an iceberg. And you remember that when an iceberg is floating in the ocean, only about 5 or 6% of it is above the surface. Most of it is hidden below the surface of the water. And if we think about information flows in the organizations, there's a lot of similarity. The people at the top maybe only know about 4% of the problems that the people at the bottom are having. As you go a little bit deeper in the organization, more knowledge is available, maybe 9%. Further down, you're up to the mid-70s, and at the bottom, most everybody knows that all the problems that are going on. So the people at the top, because they stay in their offices, do not get out into the plant. They don't know really what's going on. And vice versa, the people at the bottom don't know what the people at the top are doing either. New rules and procedures come out. They don't understand why, what's going on. They're often presented in inconsistent ways. It's amazing organizations work as well as they do when we have this level of information flow that is so weak. So it's important for us, again, to keep reviewing these ideas of leadership and managership. And again, a quick review of this. It's so important. Managers value the status quo and fixing things. Organizations are seen as machines. There's a focus on reliability, stability, predictability, and control. These are needed for the linear step-by-step processes like running a payroll or a production line or shipping schedules. That's what's needed to keep things running and to have good quality. But leaders value people changing the future. Organizations are seen as living systems. They're complex, adapting, self-organizing networks of people. The focus is on the open flow of information, building respect and trust and a sense of belonging and meaning and a high level of participation. This requires courage, care, concern, and commitment. And these are the keys to excellence. Now, lower level positions in organizations have more managership. As people progress to higher levels, more and more leadership is needed in the work. Most people are promoted because they're good managers, but managing with poor leadership skills creates dysfunctional behaviors. The leadership dance dynamically blends the managership and leadership as appropriate to achieve resilience, sustainability, and excellence. Both are needed. The leaders need to have situational awareness, and the managers do as well, and know which things they ought to be using as conditions change. Management by walking around helps us to see what's going on. We have purposeful conversations with the people every day. And anybody can exercise managership and leadership behaviors. Now again, to review Partner-centered leadership cultural characteristics. It's safe for anyone to speak up, to share information, ask questions, and provide feedback to anybody at any level. We were doing this at the plant, and there were times when people would give me what for because of something I'd done. And that was okay because I learned and got better as a result of that. Decisions are made by the people at the correct level, those that are close to the work. People come together to solve problems. Trust levels get higher and higher. And the gap between work as imagined and work as done gets closed. And as I said, I had such value for this that I walked the plant 3 to 5 hours a day for almost 8 years. A few years ago, Nancy Margulis, who participated in some of the workshops with Meg Wheatley, which I attended, drew this picture to illustrate the emergence of energy and creativity. When we share information, build relationships of trust, and help people see where they fit in, and we do this with courage, care, concern, and commitment, these transform into meaning, trust, and action. This is the work of partner-centered leadership. Sharing information, building relationships, and helping people see how they fit in translates into action, meaning, and trust, and the organizations then flourish when that happens. But it's not for free. It requires courage, care, concern, and commitment by everybody to make that happen. Now, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time walking the plant and having meaningful conversations. And I want to talk about that to give you some ideas about just what I mean. Often when we go into organizations, we find that the managers and the supervisors are uncomfortable going into the workplace. And so I want to share some things that might be helpful. The natural process of self-organization is sharing information, treating people with respect and listening, and helping them to see how their work contributes to the success of the whole business. Walking around and talking with people is one way for you to effectively use this process, this self-organizing process. Talking with the people is important, not talking at them, but talking with them. And you remember back in earlier modules I talked about simple rules. And here's another one. When people asked the Old Testament prophet Micah, "What does the Lord want from us?" he answered, "Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly." And that's what we're talking about as we go out and work with people and mix with them and talk about things that are going on. So here are some things about how I used to do this work. You may have some ideas of your own, have a little bit different picture, but I wanted to give you an overall sense of what was going on. I'd go out into the plant where the people were doing the work and spend 1 to 2 hours a day. For you, I would suggest, I did it for 5. That may be more than you can do. Over a period of time, as you're wandering around the plant, you get to talk with just about everybody. Sit down with them and have a cup of coffee or whatever, water, not beer, or alcohol. Sitting with them makes this much more personal. Be respectful and listen. We're trying to build the trust. Talk with them and not at them. Talk with 1 to a few people at a time, not a great big session, and keep it personal. Then spend 10 or 15 minutes with a group, and then maybe move on to talk with others. Share some news about what's happening in the organization, like your safety progress or a business item. Sharing small things is just fine. It doesn't have to be big announcements. And answer their questions as best you can. Now, in the next few slides here, I've got some questions and suggestions that you might consider. Don't try to do all this all at the same time. But use your good sense as you're walking around and think about the things that you can do to engage the people in purposeful conversations. For example, talk to them about their work. Most people are doing good work, and praise them when you see good work taking place. Ask them about problems. What's going on? Do they have suggestions about how to improve it? Encourage them to follow up on their ideas. So if they come up with a way to improve the job, go talk to your friends and coworkers and let's see if we can make that better. But have them take the responsibility with their idea to develop it further. As they do this, is there anything they need from you? Do you need to run interference? Do you need to help them to find somebody else about what they might have with questions? Don't challenge them with a question like, why are you doing that? You'll get really defensive. Maybe you ought to say something like, can you tell me more about what's going on here so I can learn and understand it better? Inquire about their kids or other family members and how they're doing. But don't pry. Be sensitive on this, and as you get to know them, you'll be able to do more and more of this. Watch what's going on. Listen, pay attention, ask questions for understanding. Don't go criticizing them or making some adverse judgments about what they're doing, and don't make decisions out there because you undermine the line organization. You can do that back in your office as you talk with people. But ask them if are there things that you can do better. I would often ask them, how can I get better? What am I doing that's not helpful, that's in your way? And they would tell me about that. Answer their questions the best you can. If you don't know the answer, say you don't know. Then promise to get them the answer and get back to them and do it. Don't promise it and walk away. Promise it and do it. And don't give them a lot of BS. They can see right through that. You need to be real and authentic. If they unload on you, listen and seek understanding and bite your tongue. Don't argue. Don't try to explain things. Do try to explain things the best you can. Promise to look into things further, if necessary, to clear things up. Keep going back to be with the people. Don't let this unloading on you drive you away from them. Continue to stay engaged. Tell people the truth as best you can. And the truth is based on the best information you have today. As things change, new information emerges, then tomorrow's truth may be different than today. And if that happens, promise to get back to them and tell them the new truth and talk about it further. This is an ongoing dialogue with the people. You'll be learning about both new opportunities as people play with ideas, and you'll also begin to identify problems in an early stage before they become big problems. You'll know what's happening in the organization and be better able to make good decisions. The gap between work as imagined and work as done will get much, much smaller. Because you know what's happening really in the organization, all your decision-making gets stronger and stronger. You'll develop insights about how to improve your systems and processes to make the work easier and better for everybody. You'll learn about the bullies and the harassers and can develop ways to deal with them. And you'll be creating the psychological safe space where people will know it's okay to ask questions and share information. In doing this, as trust builds, the people will be sharing more and more information. It's a learning process for everyone. The more they learn, the better they'll get at it. In this process, you're building the bowl that I talked about in earlier modules. So now I'd like to summarize what we've done here in Module 5. We've talked about partner-centered leadership and how that clearly produces the best results. Leading occupational safety and health and process safety management as an integrated whole is a key to having this become so good. We need to wake people up by dumping their old behaviors and co-creating new principles and standards, as I did at the sugar mills. And you can see that what happened there at the mills was their safety performance got very, very much better, and it happened quickly. Share essentially all the information up and down and across the organization. Through stovepipes and levels, it doesn't matter. Treat people with respect and be authentic. Help people see the importance of their work to the success of the whole, and then praise them. This leads to meaning, which releases energy and creativity. And have meaningful conversations. We talked about that, and I tried to illustrate some of the things I did and do whenever I go into an organization. Coming up in Module 6, we'll talk about harmonizing the natural processes of self-organization and doing the work. And we'll talk about creating the conditions for success. And I'll talk about blue ocean technology, which is something that could be very important for leaders and consultants as they contemplate the future. Now, before you go into Module 6, I'd like you to reflect on what we've done in Module 5. What are the 4 or 5 insights that you see in the Bell transformation story? What role did the principles and standards play in each leadership process? Do you see the 4 qualities of leadership in yourself? Courage, care, concern, and commitment? Do you need to strengthen them? Why are these important? Please practice having meaningful conversations with your people. As I said earlier in these modules, we're not only trying to share information that'll be in your head, but also some understanding that'll be in your hearts and how you'll work together with the people. Thank you very much. See you in Module 6.